Hello, and welcome to a new video. Today, guys, we'll be taking a look at the Ultra League meta. We will be making a deep dive, and of course, top teams. That's why, probably why you are guys watching this video. Before we do, remember, I will be putting time codes for each section of the video in the description in case they don't work on the video. Sometimes they don't, so in case it doesn't, you can find them in the description. Of course, we all have lives. We can't always spend like half an hour watching a video, so feel free to browse through it and pick what you actually need to watch. So of course, let's take a deep dive now. Ultra League meta in general, as of right now in this season, is basically water meta. However, water play different roles. Like, for example, Tapu Fini. It's on paper a counter for fighters, while, for example, Lantern is a counter for water types. On the other hand, we might find something like, I don't know, a Jellicent, which counters fighting types, for example, and so on. Tentacruel, of course, plays a similar role and stuff like that. So we can't really make much of a deep dive around it, so I'll try to make it a more spread yet understandable one. So with this general look, let's take a deep dive into the actual meta. Alright, so I tried my best to make it, as simple as possible, which is not actually the case in the actual Ultra League meta. Ultra League is very complicated because subtyping to most Pokemons makes them very hard to build a team around, to make a consistent team in general in Ultra League, and makes them very hard to put into an actual meta-analysis. So what I did here is, here on the top you see Poliwrath, you see Annihilape, Virizion, and of course Cobalion. So this is our fighter corner. Here on the left, in general, we have the things that lose to fighters. Weak to fighting, weak to fighting, all of this corner over here. And over this corner, we have the stuff that usually beat fighters but lose to this corner over here. Like, for example, let's take Sandslash. Sandslash can beat Tentacruel, can beat Clefable, can beat Tapu Fini, can beat Jelly, can beat Giratina, and stuff like that. You get the point. So this is as simple as I can put it. And of course, in the middle, we have the core breakers, in a sense. Core breakers here, for example, why? Let's see. Lantern, for example. Lantern can beat Poli, which is a fighter. Has an okayish matchup versus Koba and Annihilape. Can beat stuff here as well. Not all of them, of course, but can beat a lot of stuff here. And can beat a lot of stuff here as well. Charizard, Talonflame, the water types, we have a lot of actually. Can put up a fight against the others as well. Can put up a fight against Mandibuzz. So, you get the point. Skelly, of course, beats, if we take Skelly for example versus these, destroys them. Basically destroys them. Of course, not Poli. Poli has a play. Destroys most of these, not all of them, but most of them. Has a good play against all of them technically, and of course has a good play against a lot of these Pokemons. Like, I guess on paper, Skelly beats Mandibuzz. This is crazy. Beats Cresselia, can beat Dragonite if you land the right moves on the right shielding scenario and stuff like that. It has play in general. So as you see, it's simple. But on paper and when you are making teams, things get tricky. Because as you see, none of these Pokemons actually make a great core. With that being said, let's dive into the actual team building. But before that, of course, we have a small section we normally go to, which is the shield scenarios. So let's take a look at that. Alright, okay. The shielding scenario. Here we have the no shield heroes. These are Pokemon that play well when shields are down and don't play that well when shields are up. Not all of them, of course, these are based on simulation, and real gameplay they differ. But for example, something like Cresselia, it hits fairly hard, yet takes some time to charge to its move as it doesn't have a cheap bait move. So when you go to the 2 shield route, for example, something that has a cheaper move like Greedent, of course Greedent might win either way, but Greedent will greatly outpace Cresselia. So you get the point. Stuff here also, like we find Regirock. Regirock has, same like Cresselia, decent bulk, so can take a move or two and hits very hard and somewhat fast, but doesn't have fast move pressure at all. Same like Cresselia technically. So on the 2 shield run, something that is, for example, a fighter versus it will absolutely demolish it. But in the zeros, it might still land a focus blast, which will deal a huge amount of damage, unless it's annihilate. This is a GG. But you get the point. You might deal some damage. Stuff here. Well, this is a category basically. Or stuff, for example, we see stuff like Alolan Sand Slash. Alolan Sand Slash, especially in the Shadow form, isn't very bulky. It's decent in the Ultra League, but not very bulky. So when you go the 2 shield route, normally fast move alone can absolutely shred it. So it prefers lower shields. Now I have to mention something. In Ultra League there isn't this great dividing between 2 shield heroes and 0 shield heroes. Like, I find this in Great League, however when simulating in Ultra League, most Pokemons prefer the 1 shield scenario. So take all of this with a grain of salt if you may. In the middle we have the good at everything, which as the name indicates, they do fairly well with zeros, with ones and with twos. Giratina actually didn't score a good at everything in the simulation. I believe it prefers the twos, but not for me. Based on experience, Giratina just plays well with everything. Yeah, other stuff like that. Also bait dependent in most cases as well. Boost here, debuff there. Each gameplay is its own unique way, so cases differ. Here, of course, we have the shielding heroes. These are, as you know, need shields. So, for example, something like Dragonite deals an oppressive amount of fast move damage, but cannot take a hit. So, as long as you have shields to protect it, you win. Steelix. Steelix plays differently. Steelix debuffs the opponent. Whether you are running Psychic Fangs or Breaking Swipe, you play on debuffing your opponent, so the longer you let the match go, the better for you, especially if your opponent has to shield, for example, a Psychic Fang, which is very cheap and is debuffing, so it's a win-win for you if they shield it. So yeah, prefers the twos. Same, for example, with Dragonite for Ampharos, Shadow Ampharos, because Volt Switch, if you don't know, is technically speaking a 4-turn Shadow Claw clone. So it's the same as Shadow Claw, but takes 4 turns. Yeah, it's a very good fast move, generates energy fairly well, and deals a great amount of damage. So, plus the Shadow bonus on the tools, can hit mostly everything. I prefer personally to run it with Thunder Punch, because yeah, well, basically you use Trail Base for like what, Swampert? Is it worth it? I mean, maybe if you are running another electric type in the back and you are trying to bait Swampert out, then yeah, Trail Blaze is actually good, but other than that, I don't really see much goodness in it, especially since Thunder Punch is stab. It's very cheap. It's actually cheaper than Brutal Swing, so always the way to go for me. Okay, now before we move into the teams, the reason we make this list over here is to not make unbalanced team. This is of course if you don't want to make or take my teams, for example. Maybe you don't have all the Pokemons, you have a specific Pokemon, so you want to build your own team. So generally what we want is we don't want to put more than one of these, because else you'll have one hoarding all the shields and the other left useless because it cannot have shields to hide behind. So generally you need one, and that doesn't mean it's a closer, by the way, or even a lead. Each Pokemon of those plays a different role, as long as it's, well, if you want to use it as a safe swap, make sure it doesn't have double weaknesses. So for example, something like Gliscor. Gliscor is double weak to ice, so if you run it as a safe swap, you are basically committing suicide if a Walrein jumps in. Granted, there isn't many ice types in the meta currently, so it's less dangerous, but you get the point. So preferably go for stuff that doesn't take double super effective, and preferably stuff that has more play. So for example, we have this thing over here, Steelix. Steelix doesn't have very much hard counters, like it's not double super effective or anything by counter like Gliscor does with ice, so it's better to run it as a safe swap actually, because in the 2 shield scenarios you might flip a lot of matchups. I believe Breaking Swipe is very good on this Pokemon, but if you are stuck against a fairy type, it's kind of tough. Earthquake takes a lot to charge too, so depending on what the role Steelix is. Steelix, if you wanted to use it as a safe swap, it has a role of baiting out something and trying even to beat it in order to align. Let's make a team, let's make a quick team. For example, let's say Jellicent. Jellicent beats Swampert, beats Tapu Fini over here, technically loses to dark types, loses to Lantern, which Steelix can take out. It beats fighters, most importantly, which Steelix normally loses to. So all in all, they make an okay score together. Let's give it something in the back. Well, this is it. Good at everything. Let's pick Registeel. Registeel technically plays a similar role to Steelix. Well, not a similar role, because you aren't actually weak to Tapu Fini, although you are weak to Swampert. So this is it, I guess. But generally what Registeel does is do extremely well in all shielding scenario. Reggie is broken, especially in the Ultra League. So if you can use 2 shields here, Jelly, as we see, doesn't prefer shields, and Registeel does well against most opponents in either the 0s, the 1s, or the 2s. So in theory, Steelix can take 2 shields to try and flip switch. So what you use is Jellicent as a lead, you safe swap into Steelix, you bait out the fighter or a Swampert, and you try to go 2 shields and flip switch. If you can, you get alignment, and in this case basically you won the game on paper, of course, especially if you take 2 shields from your opponent as well. So you have 2 Pokemon that deal well with no shields, and they have alignment, so this is a perfect scenario. Of course, the game might go differently. You might actually take some time to learn when to throw, how to throw, how much hits you can, when to shield, when to just call it a day, when to take shield advantage if you get it, for example, and be happy with it. When you say I don't want to invest too much, when you go 2 shields down and flip if it's necessary, you know, each case is its own. So with that being said, let's now dive into the teams. Let's dive into the first team, which is the example team. After some simulation, this is basically a well-balanced team to some extent. It's good, it's actually good. It has a few core breakers, like for example Virizion, which as we mentioned in the deep analysis, well, it wasn't actually deep, it was kind of shallow, but you get the point. Virizion plays a weird role. It's a grass, so it beats water. You know, Jelly basically has the role of beating fighters, and it cannot beat a grass type. Same applies to a normal type and a dark type. So we have the three counter users down there. Although none of them is actually that common nowadays. Well, especially Scrafty and somewhat Dubwall, because you know Annihilate and Poly are right at the moment the better fighters. So you might get away with it. Still, Steelix has a play, especially if it has Psychic Fangs, somewhat hitting super effective. Maybe, I'm not so sure. Registeel is tricky for this team, of course, because, well, on paper, Reggie versus Reggie is a tie. Steelix, especially if you don't run Earthquake, is a no-go versus Registeel. And Zap Cannon near KOs. It doesn't KO, but I mean, it deals like 70-80% to Jellicent, so yeah, a core breaker for this team. But all in all, this team will actually perform somewhat well. So yeah, not bad. Let's take a look into the next team. Alright, so the next team is actually taken from the good at everything section. So we have three Pokemons that will perform, either they have 0 shield, they have 1 shield, or they have 2 shields. Doesn't matter the situation, this team will perform. So it's actually more easier to play. It performs as an ABB line. Registeel counters fairy types. We have a dragon and a dark type, so both don't want to see fairies. However, both have a play against fighters. Both, well, a ghost type and a flying type technically counter the fighting types, at least on paper. And Registeel covers for the rest. So all in all, a balanced team. We have a few core breakers for this team. One of them is Regirock, because it beats the whole team. I believe it wins CMP over Registeel, so this is basically why it wins in the simulation versus Reggie, but it's kind of a close game. However, Regirock has the ability also to bait, because Stone Edge is very much cheaper than Focus Blast. Quite the opposite actually for Registeel, because the baiting move in this scenario will be Zap Cannon, which costs more but has the chance to debuff. So yeah, a very tricky matchup for Registeel. It beats also Gira, and well, it's a rock type versus the flying type, so of course it beats Mandibles. Koba, same thing, beats Registeel and beats Mandy. Talonflame, of course, annihilates Registeel and beats Mandy, especially with shields. Well, Incinerate is broken at the moment in this season, so you know, boosted Incinerate isn't really appreciated, and Fly is actually quite good. And the Poliwrath on paper beats the whole team. Normal Poliwrath, I'm not so sure about the Shadow, but you know, Snarl is resisted, and Aerial Ace, although buffed, it's still not that good of a move. Has, even though it's not stab, but Ice Wind is good versus Giratina, and it's also debuffing it at the same time. And as long as you have shields, you can take down Registeel. If shields are down, Reggie, I believe, beat Poliwrath. So yeah, technically a core breaker. Alright, let's dive into the next team. We don't want to waste so much time on each one, because I have plenty technically. I made, if I'm not mistaken, 10 teams other than these two, because technically they are example teams. So let's dive into the next one. Alright, While third team or first team, depending on how you want to look at it, is actually a cheap and effective team. Granted, Poly needs some Excel, same applies to Trav, but not that much Excel. Somewhat manageable. This team is simple. Poly here plays the role of baiting out electric types. You really don't want to see electric types. Your grass lead handle electric types well. Trav is, well, technically beats Regirock, which Zard don't want to see, but also Poly can take care of it. Somewhat of a balanced team. Plays well. Technically an ABC slash ABB seam line. Has core breakers. Of course, the flying is one of them in general, especially the normal flyer, because it beats Trav, beats Poly, and I believe it beats Charizard as well. Of course, it's bait dependent and all of that, but in theory it beats them. Actually, G-Weezing isn't all that bad either against all of them. Tenta as well, I believe, beats 3. So all in all, yeah, like this team has some really hard answers to them. I'm not so sure you'll find all the 3 in the same team, of course, but you know, you might get somewhat hard countered with this team, but it's cheap and it will perform, especially if you are new to the game. Look, I'm gonna be honest, if you are new to the game, well, chances are you're not gonna get that high anyway. Like, it needs time. JBL itself, it needs a lot of time and lots of knowledge, like basic level skills for legend or even expert range, or even actually veteran to some extent. Okay, maybe not veteran, you might get it without counting, without move timing and so on, but if you want to go to expert and legend, you need a lot of skills that need a lot of time and a lot of knowledge about the game in general. You need to know the moves, the counts, the energy generated by fast moves, the energy required by charge moves, so it's not gonna be easy. So maybe going for a team that doesn't require much investment yet it will perform is actually quite good. Of course, there are other options, and if you go for the list and do your own simulation, if I didn't list everything, because you know I can't list everything, this is an open league after all. I did list what I believe to be, you know, the most influential Pokemons. So go to PvPoke, list the Pokemons you have, try team builder, try to see what they are counted, how they play. Go to each battle, see the 2 shield scenarios, 1 shield scenario, try each Pokemon versus the meta itself, and build your own team from there. And of course, comment any question you have, and I'll be happy to answer, and I'll be happy to have to give basically as much help as needed. So feel free to comment and ask anything, and I'll try my best to help out. So with that being said, let's move into the next team. Alright, team number 4. This is somewhat of a fast move pressure team. We have 2 counter users in the back, and we have Reggie. Very simple really, ABB line. Reggie deals well with anti-fighters, stuff like Jellicent, stuff like Tapu, Flyers, and backline deals well with the few things that counter Registeel. Stuff like Swampert. What does counter Registeel? Like, for real, guys, Reggie has play against literally everything. Well, maybe fire, but the fire, as we see in the core breaker section, is Scully, and Scully takes double resisted counter or fighting type damage, so this one will beat the whole team. But yeah, you get the sense of it. The core breakers, as we see, are Annihilate, which beats Poly and beats Reggie. Scully beats the whole team. A ghost type like Trevenant, which has also a grass type, beats the whole team. Virizion maybe loses to Annihilate, but beats on paper Poli and Reggie. But as we know, actual game isn't simulation. Energy difference, they swap, you swap out, you have energy, you just spawn down. A Pokemon was your first mon, you threw something, they came back again, so they are a bit less on health, maybe have a bit more energy, you know how it is. So don't take simulation very seriously, it's just an idea, like to be prepared, not more. All in all, I might be using this team, it seems very fun, very fast, doesn't take a lot of time, so yeah. Let's move into the next team. Alright, next team. We have Annihilate, we have Greedent, and we have Shadow Ampharos. This is an ABC line. If you don't know what ABC means, it means a core. The core here in this case is Annihilate and Ampharos. Ampharos deals with water types, you know, like Tentacruel, like Jellicent, and also deals with flyers that beat Annihilate. Annihilate deals to some extent with Swampert, with dragons, especially for example Guzzlord, even though it has a dark subtyping, it takes super effective damage from the fast move and from Ice Punch, so you can deal with it. Not Giratina though, but Ampharos has Brutal Swing for Giratina, and it's not actually a bad matchup for it. All in all, Annihilate is actually a good Pokemon. Well, currently at least fighters are good. Annihilate will take care of G-Fisk, although this one is somewhat rare. It will take care of Regirock, it will take care of Registeel. These might be a bit more troubling. It will take care of something like Virizion, which will take Ampharos out. So all in all, it's a good and somewhat cheap actually core. Greedent isn't that cheap. Greedent require XL. Even though it was in the wild, I'm not so sure how many people got enough XLs for it, since all in all it's normally not that common in the wild like other Pokemon. So maybe replace it, because technically here we are not making a core, like an ABB core. Here Greedent plays simply a role of a safe swap. You know, Greedent plays well with shields, so give it to shield, it might be able to flip a match or two. Although this team in theory breaks my idea of making a team, because Shadow Ampharos also requires shields, but Shadow Ampharos can play somewhat okayish without shields, and Greedent can play without shields. It doesn't require shield. It's not that squishy, it's actually very bulky, quite the opposite. So, you know, but pick something that you can swap into a Trevenant or a Giratina or a Jelly or a Cresselia, because you need something for those if you face them in the lead, or else, you know, the team is core broken. Speaking of core breakers, we have in the list below Toxie. Toxie is also a anti-fighter. It has somewhat of a okayish matchup versus Annihilate, simply because Shadow Ball deals super effective damage, while Annihilate deals neutral damage with its Shadow Ball. They both require 6 for their cheapest move. Gliscor is a flyer that has ground typing, so it beats both Annihilate as well as Ampharos. And we have a Pokemon that resists counter, Venusaur, resists also electric from Ampharos, and can actually beat 2-shot, I believe. A Shadow Veno, I believe it can 2-shot a Greedent. So yeah, these are the core breakers. They are somewhat not very threatening, especially for example Veno isn't actually very common, although it's very required because it beats water types that are literally everywhere. Gliscor on the other hand doesn't beat them all, but fares well with them. Toxic Rogue is good, but maybe it lacks stab moves. in general. Mud Bomb isn't stab, Shadow Ball isn't stab. If you don't have Sludge Bomb, you can't really beat Tapu Fini, so you are a poison that doesn't beat the fairy. You still cannot really beat ghost types because you don't one-shot. You get outpaced, and also you are not throwing a stab. They are throwing a stab moves, so it's very tricky to run it. It was very good the season before because it was the only fighter that beat other fighters. It beat Cobalion, it beat Virizion. Actually, it walled both of them because it resisted all their moves. So I'm not so sure how it's good in this season, but you might encounter it. Anyway, let's move into the next team. Alright, now this team is very tricky but very rewarding. On paper, it I believe scored D, then AAA. Either C or D and then AAA. It has a lot of core breakers, but it also has a lot of good matchup. Like for example, you have 3 Pokemon that in theory beat water types, 3 Pokemon that beat in theory fighting types. Why I say in theory? Because Tentacruel technically technically is a water type, yet it beats both Virizion and Trev. So you get the point. It's technically. But all in all, the team is good. I did run somewhat of a similar team before and it performed greatly. But so many core breakers. Like, yeah, very tricky. Like, if you are in a neutral situation, you will probably win. But if you aren't, yeah, you're probably effed. One of the core breakers is actually, as we see, Mandibles. Depending on the moveset you are running with Cress. I myself, not saying you should do it, but I myself run Moonblast and run Future Sight. Because in this meta, Dark are not completely out of the picture like the Great League, so Moonblast is needed. You cannot really one-shot anything in the Ultra League with Grassnot. I believe you will still lose Jelly, depending on energy and stuff like that, but yeah, and you, for example, something like Tentacruel, you already need the Future Sight more than you need the Grass. I would go for Future Sight, especially in this team, because you need to hit fire types, like the 2 down there, Skelly and Talon. So yeah, they might win. Of course they will win, but they won't get out of it with health and shields and stuff like that. No, you will take them low enough. For example, if you take Skelly low enough, you can farm it down with Trev. Trev isn't actually all that squishy in the Ultra League. Talonflame, if it's boosted and invested 2 shields, where you're fucked. Simply, I'm not gonna lie. A boosted Incinerate will probably take the whole team down. So yeah, that's very tricky. Well, into the next team. Alright, now this is an old top performing team of mine. Back then, when I used to run it with Dragon Breath because Obstagoon and Scrafty were everywhere. And believe it or not, Dragon Breath Giratina beats those. This is crazy. But yeah, this is Giratina for you. But nowadays, I'm not so sure Dragon Breath is the way to go. So, up to you, of course. The recommended moveset from PvPoke is actually Shadow Claw with Shadow Sneak and Dragon Claw. I myself tend to not really like using Shadow Sneak because it's a shitty move. I prefer the rock type move, the Ancient Power, more, so normally I run it, but it depends on what you guys like and what you guys prefer. Running, well, you know, the rock type move will basically make you useless versus steel types. So maybe Shadow Sneak is the way to go. The rest moveset are, you know, well known. Shadow Claw for Sand Slash, of course. Core breakers, we have Scrafty, as we said before, especially if you are running Shadow Claw. We have Double, well, double is very tricky for the whole team. However, with Registeel, Focus Blast will do a great chunk of damage. We have Greedent. Registeel absolutely beats it, but lead and back line are weak to it, so it's tricky. Like, what do? You swap into your Registeel, they swap out, you lost your only counter to Greedent. That's not very effective. However, Body Slam is resisted by Sand Slash, so maybe if you can align it with Sand Slash, it's actually not terrible. And Dragon Claw does add up, and I believe you need 3 crunches if you don't get a debuff on Giratina, so you know, the whole team is kind of playable against it. I didn't really struggle much before against it, despite the team on paper losing to it. So let's see. Into the next team. Alright, now another affordable in a way team. Like Swampert, of course, is very affordable. We have the Bug, the Water Bug type. It's actually Golly. It's actually technically affordable on paper. It requires a lot of candy to evolve, but it's spawned in the wild. A lot, so I believe we have it. This one, Pidgeot, require a lot of XL, full XL technically, and the tricky part is that you need a Hundo on paper. So maybe replace it if you don't have it, but the gist of it is, well, you have an ABC line, both Swampert and Pidgeot if you have played it in the Great League before. Great Core, Golly, well, can play against grass types, especially something like a Trav, can bait out a water type, so plays a good role as a safe swap for an ABC team, and also can somewhat be an ABB line in a way. Common core breakers are Guzzlord, well, destroys the whole team in a way. Double beats the lead and beats the safe swap, and Tapu Fini on paper beats the 3, but I don't believe this is actually the case in real game, especially with Golisopod and Pidgeot when shields are up. So up to you guys if you want to run this team. Now let's dive into the next one. Alright, so unlike the other old team, the top performing team I used to play in previous seasons, this one I played and it's not balanced, but it's good. Like Talonflame is broken in all leagues, well, not in Master League, but you know, the capped ones. And Trevenant is very underrated at the moment. Well, when I used to play it, it was a different game. It was, well, Trev wasn't really that bad. It had 5 Shadow Claw Seed Bomb, but Talonflame didn't have a buffed Incinerate, so kind of balanced out a bit. All in all, the team has many core breakers, especially dragons in general and Guzzlord in specific. Now, Guzzlord beats the whole team. Fly is a good move, it's a stab move, but it's basically the only move you have as a neutral against Guzzlord. Rest, Fire, both Incinerate and Flame Charge, Dark, also resisted, Electric, also resisted, Ghost, also resisted, Grass, also resisted. So yeah, Guzzlord is a nightmare for this team, and I believe at some point I stopped running the team because of Guzzlord actually. But I mean, depending on your elo range, maybe you don't see much of Guzzlord, so it's actually pretty good if you don't see Guzzlord. Some core breakers are the water types that beat the grass, the backline grass. So for example, Greninja can beat Trav. Same applies to Tentacruel, but all in all, that's about it. You know, the team is very good, like really very good. But of course, run it at your own responsibility, not mine. But I might run it myself, so yeah. I mean, especially versus fighters, when you have a core that beat fighters, it's not a bad team. You lose versus Poly in your lead, technically, but it's a fair game. Backline beats it. The whole team has play against Annihilate. Well, Verizion is tricky. Verizion is very tricky because you have a core that beats it, and if you are using Ampharos as a safe swap, you might struggle. So you can run actually the team with Trevenant as a safe swap. It's not bad. It's not bad at all actually, since it might draw out a Registeel. Ampharos doesn't really want to see Registeel, but Registeel just want to escape being in a battle versus Talonflame, so you might actually succeed in doing so. So maybe Trevenant isn't actually a bad, in a sense, safe swap. Here I believe Swampert isn't listed because I didn't put Sunder, so Trailblaze beats Swampert. So maybe in this team, especially if you are running Ampharos, maybe go for Trailblaze. Not so sure. Anyway, let's move into the next team. Okay, so the idea behind this team is basically to change things up a bit. Like, if I'm gonna go and build a team, especially in simulation, I'll probably put Registeel in every team, and it's kind of boring. So I need to spice things up a bit. G-Fisk is absolutely gone now for some reason. Well, it's a known reason. Earthquake. Earthquake, by the way, wasn't a debuff targeting Stunfisk, it was a debuff targeting the Almighty. Of course, we all know what that Pokemon is and how it's ruining the Master League and will ruin Ultra League if enough people get it. So I hope people who get it at least go play it in the Master League and leave us poor people in the cups alone, hopefully. So yeah. So the idea behind this team is simple. You have an anti-fighter in the lead, a fairy type. You have two Pokemons weak to fighting in the back. That's pretty much it. It's a very simple team. It has some core breakers. For example, Registeel can beat both Greedent as well as your lead. So this is one. By the way, the Pokemon I was referring to is Zygarde, in case it wasn't clear. Also Tapu Fini, it beats the lead, it beats the safe, and it beats the backline of G-Fisk on paper, but they all have play, even G-Fisk technically. And Talonflame, it beats the lead, beats the safe swap, and in theory it beats also Stunfisk. Like, this team isn't great against fire in general, but especially those with Incinerate, because you cannot one-shot with a Rock Slide. And depending on shielding scenario, if Talonflame is very scary in general if you aren't countering it, even if you are neutral against it and it ramps the Incinerate damage, it's very scary to play. So yeah, when you are taking super effective damage from it, it's not looking very good. Charizard has wing attack, so it's less threatening and kind of squishy, so even with the resisted damage from Clefable, 2 moves I believe KO or near KO, so you know, manageable more, especially since you are resisting the wing attack and you outpace the Rock Slide versus Blast Burn. So yeah, let's move into the next team now. Alright, we are still changing the tone in a way. Here we have Tapu Fini in the lead, a good Pokemon that is hard to build a team around. Very hard actually. Extremely hard, especially since Tapu doesn't play well when shields are up. So even, for example, a Greninja, if you play the 2 shield scenario, might actually beat you. So, you know, it's very tricky to play it. Lantern basically is good because it's a water meta. So, you know, basically reaches like below to 400 CP, so it does well, it's not actually bad. Surprisingly it's good, but in this team it makes it ABA weak to grass, so maybe not run it. Up to you. I wanted to make a Lantern team, to be fair. Well, more to stuff Lantern into a team, to be more precise. Giratina does well in this team, has a play against Registeel. They all have play against Registeel technically. Even Tapu. I mean, shields are everything, guys. and games and simulation are totally different. Anyway, we have a core breaker for this team that will beat the whole team, which is a bonus now. We are talking about ice and grass, so bye the whole team. Trav technically can beat the whole team. Skunk Tank can beat the whole team, especially if it's running Trailblaze, so it hit Lantern for super effective damage as well. Same applies to Cresselia, Moonblast for Giratina, and Grass for Z2. So yeah, a very tricky team to play actually and to pull off, but might be fun. So this is it. Again, it changed in the tone. Alright, next I believe this will be the final team now, so let's take a look. Alright, final team. Now this is normally reserved for the best simulation team. This team scored B, A, A, A. This is as high as you can get in PvPoke as far as I know. I don't know anyone that have ever made a 4 A's. The highest is 3 A's and a B. Especially in open format, it's very hard not to find a Pokemon that beat at least 2 of your Pokemon, so maybe 3 even. So yeah, it's very hard to pull it off. However, on paper this team will perform greatly, but it's very slow, very limited, and kind of boring. Well, a lot boring. It has 3 very bulky Pokemons. So it's consistent. This is it. Core breakers, we have Talonflame. Well, beats 2 of the 3. Gliscor can beat 3, but you have play against it with everything basically but Registeel. Trevenant beats lead, beats safe, and in some scenarios it beats Giratina as well. Another core breaker is actually Skelly, because it beats lead, beats safe swap, and in some scenarios as well, and depending on how your lands move, what energy you have, you might be able to beat Giratina as well. So all in all, somewhat common core breakers. Skelly is very common and very popular, so you might struggle versus some of the meta, but all in all it will perform good. I mean, if you run it on a great run, it will perform well. But it will not be the teams that give you like 5-0 and stuff like that. No. This is basically a team that you play for a day, get a 20-30 plus elo, and stay consistent with it. So yeah, this was the final team. I'm sorry guys, I didn't make a top teams for the Hisui Cup, because time have passed. We are already past or near past the first week of the Hisui Cup. I believe most people are familiar with the meta. This is a very simple meta by now, and have their performing teams, so didn't really feel much necessary. If you find that this isn't the case, and you probably want me in specific to make a team, a deep dive and top teams for it, let me know in the comments. If like 2-3 people plus want it, actually I'm prepared to do it, but if not, yeah, it's too much work for if not it's not gonna be useful for anyone. So yeah, with that being said, see you in the next video. I'll probably try Ultra League. I'll try some of the team featured here. I'll let you know how they went, how we can improve them in a way. For example, in the top teams for Great League video, if you have watched it, one of the example teams was Lantern, Lickitung, and Mandibuzz. This team was a good at everything example, and man, it performed well. It's my go-to team, my best team for this season. Others may not have performed as well, so paper and actual play are totally different. So I'll let you guys know. With that being said, see you in the next one. Bye bye.